The knock on my front door wasn't a knock at all. It was a pounding, sharp, urgent, vibrating through the frame like a warning I hadn't earned. My son, 12 years old, froze midway through tying his shoelaces. His eyes flicked to mine, wide, asking a question neither of us had time to voice. "Amira, I'm 39, and on that afternoon, I learned how fast a childhood can be taken." When I opened the door, 2 officers stood on my porch, hands already near their holsters. Behind them, the winter light made everything look washed out. My yard, their faces, the truth. "Ma'am," one said, "we have a report involving your son." Before I could speak, my sister stepped out from behind them. Her smile was small, almost satisfied. "There he is," she said, pointing at my child as though he were a stain. "That's the boy who attacked my daughter." My breath cracked in my throat. Attacked? She was at my house for 10 minutes. They were doing homework. She came home crying, my sister snapped. She said he shoved her, threatened her, said he'd hurt her if she told. My son's voice trembled behind me. "Mom, I didn't." "I know," I whispered, but the officers were already stepping past me. "Turn around, son," one ordered. I moved in front of him instinctively. "He's a child. You're not putting handcuffs on." "Yes, they are," my sister cut in. "He needs to learn consequences." And then I saw them. My parents, standing at the edge of the driveway watching. Not intervening. Not questioning. Not defending their grandson. Just watching. My son looked at me once more, his eyes pleading before cold metal closed around his wrists. As they led him away, something in me didn't break. It focused. Because I knew exactly what my sister, my parents, and this entire scene relied on. My silence. They were about to learn who I was without it. The squad car door shut with a hollow thud that felt louder than any scream I could have made. My son sat inside, his small shoulders rigid, his face turned toward the window so no one would see his tears. The image carved itself into me, sharp, permanent, unforgiving. My sister stood to the side, arms crossed, her expression composed in that polished way she'd always worn when attention turned her sweet. My parents lingered behind her, stiff and silent. My father looked at the ground. My mother looked everywhere but at me. I walked up to them slowly. "You really believe my son would hurt his cousin?" I asked. My sister didn't blink. "Kids lie, Mira. Yours always has." A lie so casual she tossed it like confetti. I turned to my parents. "And you too? You really just stood there?" My mother smoothed her coat. "Sweetheart, we didn't want to interfere. The police know what they're doing." My father nodded once, avoiding my eyes. "Let the process go through. If he's innocent, it'll sort itself out." It was surreal, standing in my own driveway, listening to the people who raised me justify a humiliation they just watched unfold. "He's 12, I whispered, my voice trembling despite my control. 12. And you let them handcuff him?" My sister shrugged. "Maybe next time he'll think twice." "About what?" I asked. "Breathing?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't start drama, Mira." Drama. That word again. A lifetime of being told my pain was exaggeration. I looked down the street where the police car had disappeared. My son was out of sight now, but not out of reach, not mine. My sister exhaled sharply. "You'll thank me one day. This is discipline." I stepped closer, my voice steady, quiet, almost gentle. "Thank you?" She smirked. "For protecting my daughter." I nodded slowly. "No," I said. "For showing me exactly what you're willing to destroy." Her smile faltered. Because she didn't realize something had shifted the moment that patrol car left. I stopped being the quiet one. I spent the next 3 hours in a plastic chair at the police station, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and cold, while every sound, phones ringing, papers shuffling, footsteps echoing, felt distant, muted, irrelevant. My son sat in a small interview room down the hall. I wasn't allowed inside yet. "Procedure," they said. "Protocol." Protocol didn't care about the way he had looked at me as they led him away. A young officer finally approached. "Ma'am, your son's statement was calm, consistent, and credible. We contacted the school. A few students confirmed he and his cousin never argued, not once. Her story has gaps." Gaps. Of course it did. Nothing she said was true. "Can I see him now?" I asked. He nodded. The moment I stepped into the room, my son stood and collapsed into my arms, his small body shaking. "Mom, I didn't touch her," he whispered into my shoulder. "I know," I murmured. "I know, sweetheart." His breathing slowed, but his eyes held something new, something a 12-year-old shouldn't have to learn yet: betrayal. A detective entered next. Ms. Hale, after reviewing evidence, we're releasing him. There will be no charges. Relief washed through me, but it didn't cool the fire underneath. My son and I walked out to the parking lot. The winter wind brushed his hair across his forehead. He held my hand tighter than he ever had before. Then the detective called after me. One more thing, your sister insisted on filing a full written statement. She pushed hard. That's unusual. Unusual? No. It was calculated. Because she didn't just want him scared. She wanted him marked. My parents had backed her. Quietly. Conveniently. As we reached the car, my son looked up at me. Mom, are they going to get away with this? I opened the door for him. No, I said gently. Not even close. And for the first time since the officers arrived at my house, I felt my mind sharpen. Not toward revenge. Toward justice. I drove home slowly, not because of the snow, but because my son's hand stayed wrapped around mine even as I shifted gears. His silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, holding questions he didn't know how to form yet. When we finally stepped inside the house, he went straight to the couch and curled beneath a blanket, as if trying to shrink the day into something survivable. I sat beside him. Do you want to talk? He shook his head, eyes fixed on nothing. I didn't do anything, he whispered. Why would Aunt Claire say that? I touched his hair gently. Because some adults mistake power for truth. He swallowed hard. Grandma didn't stop them. No softness could have answered that. So I chose honesty. I know. A single tear slid down his cheek, not from fear, but from understanding something he was far too young to understand. Sometimes the people who should protect you don't. I tucked the blanket around him and stepped into the kitchen, my breath steady, my hands calm. Pain sharpened my mind rather than clouding it. I pulled out my laptop. Not to rant. Not to fight. To document. Every detail of today. Times. Statements. Names. The officer's words. The detective's concerns. My sister's insistence on filing a statement. My parents' refusal to intervene. When I finished, I began compiling something else, a collection I'd been quietly saving for years. Not because I expected to use it, but because patterns have a way of becoming proof when finally arranged side by side. Emails. Texts. Voicemails. Financial discrepancies. My sister's unethical behavior at work. My father's role on a local board. My mother's involvement in her nonprofit's grant allocations. Every thread they never thought I noticed. And all of it, traceable. My phone buzzed then, my mother calling. I let it ring. Because everything they had ignored, excused, and enabled was about to converge. Not for revenge. For consequence. My mother's call went to voicemail, followed by my father's, then my sister's, each one a different tone of urgency, none of them apologizing. They weren't calling out of concern for my son. They were calling because they had finally sensed something they'd never expected. I wasn't spiraling. I was organizing. My son had fallen asleep on the couch, exhaustion softening his face. I covered him with another blanket and stepped into my office, closing the door gently behind me. The house felt still, but inside me something had begun moving with steady precision. I opened a new folder on my laptop. Incident report, family. Not for the police. Not for angry emails. But for leverage. Because careers don't crumble from emotion. They crumble from documentation. I started with Claire. Her nursing license. Her disciplinary warnings. The complaint last year from a patient's family. The incident report she thought no one had seen, where she'd misreported medication and shifted blame. Her recent grant application filled with exaggerated statistics. And numbers she pulled from my research without permission. Every piece fit together like a puzzle she didn't know she'd been assembling for me. Next, my mother. Her nonprofit's annual report. The grant misuse flagged internally but never formally addressed. The volunteers she dismissed. The funds that didn't match receipts. Then, my father. His advisory role at the local council. The conflict of interest votes he'd cast. The email thread where he'd approved a vendor his friend owned, despite the ethics guidelines he'd signed. Each file I opened solidified one truth. Their stability had always depended on silence. 1. I gathered every document into categories: timeline, evidence, corroboration. Clinical. Methodical. Undeniable. By the time the clock read past midnight, I had built what they feared most. A truth they couldn't control. My phone buzzed again, another call from my sister. This time a voicemail. Her voice trembled. Mira, please call me back. I think we need to talk. I smiled faintly. Oh yes, we would. I didn't listen to my sister's voicemail right away. Instead, I watched the little red notification blink, steady, impatient, almost rhythmic. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and my son's breathing from the living room. That sound grounded me. Reminded me why none of it, was optional anymore. When I finally pressed play, her voice spilled out, thinner than I'd ever heard it. Mira, I think things got out of hand today. Maybe we both overreacted. Can we just reset? Call me reset. A word people use when they want to skip accountability and jump straight to forgiveness. I set the phone down. The next call came 15 minutes later, this time from my mother. Mira, honey, we're all upset. Your sister didn't mean to involve the police like that. She panicked. You know how emotional she is. I almost laughed. Claire wasn't emotional. She was calculated. Your father thinks we should sit down as a family tomorrow, she continued. Let's not escalate anything. Escalate. Another word used by people who've never faced consequences. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened a new document titled Distribution Plan. 3 emails. 3 departments. 3 quiet detonations. The nursing board, with Claire's misconduct file attached. The nonprofit oversight committee, with my mother's grant discrepancies. The city ethics office, with my father's conflict of interest evidence. Not threats. Just truth delivered formally. Before sending anything, I paused, because revenge without intention is chaos. But this wasn't revenge. It was exposure. A mirror held up to people who had spent years avoiding their reflection. My son stirred on the couch. I stepped out and knelt beside him. He blinked sleepily. Mom, are we okay? I brushed his hair back. We're more than okay. We're protected. He exhaled softly, trusting me in a way that tightened my chest with fierce love. When he fell back asleep, I returned to my office, placed my fingers over the keyboard, and pressed send. 1 email at a time. 3 careers quietly began to unravel. They always expected me to break first, cry first, apologize first. But the morning after I sent those emails, it wasn't my phone lighting up with desperation. It was theirs. At 7:12 a.m., Claire called 3 times in a row. I didn't pick up. At 7:45, my father texted, "Call me now." At 8:03, my mother sent a voice note that began steady, then cracked apart like thin ice. But I didn't need to listen to them to know what was happening. Organizations respond quickly to documentation. The first call came not from my family, but from the nursing board investigator. Ms. Hale, she said, thank you for your submission. We've opened a formal inquiry. Your sister is required to provide a statement within 48 hours. Required, not requested. At 9:16, my mother's nonprofit sent a public memo freezing all grant disbursements until an internal review was complete. At 10:02, the city ethics office emailed me to confirm they had received the evidence regarding my father's violations. Their phrasing was deliberate. Your records suggest ongoing misconduct. We will proceed accordingly. Meanwhile, my house stayed quiet. My son ate cereal at the table, legs swinging beneath the chair, still shaken but safe. His eyes kept drifting to me, watching, learning, reassured by my steadiness. Around noon, a car pulled up outside. My sister. She didn't storm in like she used to. She knocked, 3 quick taps, shaky. When I opened the door, her face was pale, eyes red, her usual sharpness stripped away. Mira, you need to stop this, she said, voice trembling. You're ruining everything. I studied her, this woman who had watched my child handcuffed and felt nothing. No, I said softly. I'm not ruining anything. I'm revealing it. Her breath hitched. Please. They're talking about suspending my license. Mom's in tears. Dad's furious. I didn't blink. Actions. Consequences. You did this, I said. Not me. Behind me, my son stepped into the hallway. Claire's eyes flicked to him, and filled with something I had never seen in her before. Fear. Claire's gaze locked on my son, then darted back to me, as if hoping I'd shield her from the very consequences she had unleashed. Her breath came shallow, quick, nothing like the confidence she carried yesterday while pointing at him, telling officers to take him. Mira, please, she whispered. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding. I'll fix it. I'll talk to the board. Just stop this before it gets worse. I stepped slightly to the side, giving her a clear view of the boy she tried to crush. You watched them handcuff a child. My child. And you didn't blink. Her lips trembled. I thought she was telling the truth. No, I said quietly. You wanted her to be. The truth cut deeper than anger ever could. My son stood beside me, not hiding this time but not stepping forward either. Just present, steady, watching the adult who had weaponized power against him crumble beneath the weight of her own lies. Claire wiped her nose with her sleeve. Mom and Dad said you're destroying the family. I held her gaze. They watched. They did nothing. Families aren't destroyed by truth, they're destroyed by silence. And I'm done being silent. She swallowed. What do you want from me? Accountability, I said. A statement retracting your accusation. A written apology to my son. And cooperation with the investigation. Her eyes widened. They'll fire me. That's not my problem, I replied, voice calm. I don't clean up the messes that hurt my child. She took a small step backward, stunned by the simplicity of the boundary. You're serious? For the first time, I said, you're seeing who I really am. My son slipped his hand into mine again, not out of fear but understanding. Claire turned away, shoulders shaking. She walked down the steps slowly, as if carrying the weight she had placed on a 12-year-old. I closed the door gently. No shouting. No chaos. Just a quiet, irreversible truth. When they came for my child, they forfeited their immunity. Their careers didn't fall because I destroyed them. They fell because I stopped holding them up.